What is up, everybody? This is blueandgold.com's Mike Singer, joined as always by our football analyst here at blueandgold.com, Mike Goolsby, live on YouTube to break down Notre Dame's 45-21 victory over Syracuse. Certainly more of an interesting game than we thought it was going to be. Please, if you are watching this live on YouTube, if you're watching us back, please go ahead and hit that thumbs up button to like the video and subscribe to us on YouTube if you are not already. And for our podcast audience, yes, we post the audio version of this show on our podcast. So if you're listening via Apple or wherever, please subscribe to us on Apple Podcast. Leave us a 5-star review. That really helps us out. All right, Mike, let's get right into instant takeaways from the game. 24-point win for the Irish. Syracuse covered the 33.5 point spread there. And again, like I mentioned, it was more of an interesting game than we were expecting. So instant takeaways, Mike, what would you learn from the game?
First thought, kind of watching the game wind down, was it's unfortunate they touched on it during the broadcast. That, it's senior day, guys couldn't be out there with their families to kind of soak in that moment. But on the flip side of that, your seniors showed up today. Kind of the studs, kind of the captains of the team. Book played tremendous. Jalen Hayes played tremendous. Owusu Koromoa played tremendous. Who else am I missing? McKinley, senior, played tremendous. So it was kind of a fitting end for those guys. That was my instant, I guess, maybe the storyline, Mike. Outside of that, slow start again. That tends to happen during these senior days. I think sometimes I was guilty of that. My senior day inside Notre Dame Stadium, you get a little bit into your feelings, as the kids say, and I think you can get too overwhelmed in what you've been through, and maybe just lose sight of the task at hand. But overall, it was a convincing enough win. I'm sure a lot of people made money, like you said today, by the fact that Syracuse did in fact cover. But just a solid game all around. Again, good to see some seniors get a chance to step up and leave that stadium on a high note.
Again, we're going to talk all things Notre Dame Syracuse. Ian Book improving to 30-3 as Notre Dame starting quarterback. We'll talk about the run defense. Yeah, so we will get there. What contributed to the slow start? So we're gonna talk about all these things. Quick thank you to Blake Way Panoramas for bringing some Fighting Irish spirit to my home office, which if you were watching on YouTube, you can see it behind me in all of these videos. See the entire Notre Dame sports collection at panoramas.com or bluegoldonline.com. All right, Mike, next segment, who flashed? Anyone in particular that maybe you weren't expecting that stand out that did? Who really looked good in your opinion in this game?
Owusu Koromoa, number one. McKinley, probably number two. And we mentioned McKinley's name last week. That's 200-yard plus receiving performances back to back. Tyree flashed. Shoot. And finally, Mike, it's like that play that is 94-yard run, 2nd and 17. It's blocked perfectly. But we finally got, as fans, a chance to see Tyree open up and flash that speed that we've been waiting to see.
Right.
And you knew it was going to happen. And I almost called for it a little bit on the message boards. And I don't know if we call that a breakout performance, but really fun to see Tyree get his chance. Who else am I missing? Hayes had a great game.
How about that pick?
Yeah, well, it's interesting. So there's been multiple times, I think Foskey has been that drop end a couple times, and they've done an admirable job in coverage thus far. So it was nice to see it kind of pay off with an actual pick. But the two big ones, and we'll call it three, and I can't forget Williams either. So yeah, your top four is probably Book, McKinley, Tyree, and Owusu Koromoa, in terms of guys like that. Owusu Koromoa, man, that fumble he caused dude's got the big tight end, probably 260-pound tight end's got the ball in the opposite hand like he should, closest to the sideline. Cormoa doesn't wrap up, just blaps him. Ball pops out. Just it's really fun to get a chance to see an explosive playmaker like that. It's going to be doing that on Sundays here very shortly.
For those who are watching live on YouTube, we want to make sure that you're aware of the super chat option. This is basically your way if you watch our live shows or any other YouTube content and you want to support what we're doing here at blueandgold.com. Click that little $ button. Anything that you can drop us is very helpful to continue to keep the lights on here at blueandgold.com and for us to produce awesome YouTube content. We really enjoy doing these live shows. Mike, you're smiling. You must love doing these, right?
Hey, I love it. Awesome YouTube comment, and kudos to you, Mike. The show has gotten progressively better, and for fans watching or listening at home, I mean, Mike's literally producing the show as he's trying to field questions and deal with me at the same time. So no small feat. So yeah, kudos to you, buddy.
Yeah, I've gotten better at it as it goes on. Yeah, a lot of different things going on. Our podcast audience has no idea what the heck we're talking about with this, but so if you are listening via podcast later in the weekend, you got to go to our blueandgold.com YouTube page. Just search Blue and Gold Illustrated on YouTube, and you should be able to find us. No problem. All right, Mike. One more thing. Kind of areas of improvement. Anything jump to the top of your head? I guess we can get into the defensive run game here.
Let's do that.
Syracuse rushed for. Let's go ahead and pull up the defensive stats here. Or the game comparison, I should say. Syracuse 414 total yards, 229 rushing yards. Wow. Mike, any concerns here going into the ACC Championship Game in a couple weeks?
No. So to start with an emphatic no. What was the rush yards again, Mike? I can't.
229 for Syracuse.
Okay, so 229 minus 120 on 2 plays. So they had a long touchdown run, 40 yards, I think first quarter, and then you had the 80-yard run there as the game was winding down. Same play, same defense. It's a flaw in the defense in terms of the number of blockers that they have and the way that our linebackers are supposed to fit. And football terminology, like you're a spill player. So our linebackers are supposed to spill the ball, essentially from what it looks like to the safety. And Hamilton, you'll never hear this come out of my mouth again, but Hamilton took a bad angle on that the 40-yard run. And he's too deep to come up and run support. If that's the way it's going to be fit, and the same thing happened on the 80-yard run. So that's correctable schematically in the next couple of weeks in practice film. So it's not really alarming. It's alarming to see, Mike, but when you kind of peel back the onion a little bit or peel a layer off the onion, it's fixable.
Sure.
We just kind of got caught and didn't catch the ball carrier. So I don't think the team's like reading their press clippings and we're this dominant defense. I don't think that's the case. It's just great play call, wrong run fits, schematically correctable. I think an area of concern, and it wasn't the case last week, but playing UNC, you're a little bit concerned about the secondary. It's been a little bit suspect, hasn't really shown up. McLeod's done a really strong, serviceable job thus far this year. But that opposite corner and Sean Crawford, it just, like today, they're just kind of out there. They're just sort of just kind of oozing around. So that's going to be interesting to see if how you kind of rotate players in, what Sean Crawford ends up doing. But the corner opposite McLeod is
Clarence Lewis,
not something you're going to.
True freshman.
Yeah. The true freshman. He's out there, and he's probably a little bit trigger shy just because of his youth, but he's got to be more assertive and give less cushion in certain down and distance type scenarios. Like he's just always kind of there, and he's there a full step late, and that's obviously he's afraid of getting beat over the top. But hopefully they can continue to kind of groom him in the next couple of weeks and encourage him to play a little bit more aggressively because that's a little bit concerning. That's like from what I saw today.
I have the defensive stats pulled up here for our YouTube audience. Clarence Lewis led Notre Dame in tackles, and it wasn't even close. That's probably not a good thing, Mike, if your corner has 12 total tackles. He had a pass breakup and a forced fumble as well. So, yeah. And you mentioned he's playing with so much cushion. So, yeah, you're giving up a lot of those shorter passes. So, Clarence Lewis.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So that's an offensive coordinator going at him. He comes up and makes a tackle, fine. But how many of those plays should have been contested catches, PBUs, etc. So it's something to shore up, figure out how to help him over the top, like I've been asking for, leaving Hamilton over the top. So we'll see. But we love to find things to complain about, Mike. Um, I was looking at your tweets during the game. Like you wanted to take a nap, and it's like we're the
I
number
did.
2 team in the. Yeah, I hear you, but we're the number 2 team in the country. Yeah, and you do have to go through these games, especially without having the ability to rewatch it with these live shows. But oftentimes you do find yourself going over, like I said, fine tooth comb, trying to find something to talk about.
You're
To be
right.
frank,
Well,
yeah,
that leads us into our next question for you, Mr. Goolsby. Did you learn anything new from this game about Notre Dame football team in this season? Is there anything new to take away that we didn't know going into this game, or was it kind of just we need to get through this game, win it comfortably, and not have any injuries?
yeah, and I'm curious to see what happened to Bo Bauer. I mean, what the end result of that looks like. That's a little concerning for me. What did you learn? Um, I think, Mike, as long as Ian Book's back there, the job gets done. It was kind of touch and go early in the game. Again, clunky is the word that comes to mind at the start of the game, but eventually he just asserts himself and does what he needs to do. Scores on a touchdown run. Okay, all right, everything's fine. So it's a tremendous luxury for us to have Ian Book back there at the helm. Uncharacteristic interception today. I'll take it. He was pushing the ball downfield. Um, it's just I was again, Mike, thinking of things to talk about during the post game show as you're watching the game today.
Yeah.
Man, like just take this whole season into account and where we started, all the concerns, all the moaning, all the head scratching, and where we're at today. What a journey it's been, and Ian Book's been central to that. But in most of these games, most of these scenarios with Book at the helm, winning his 30th game today, like last week, I wasn't concerned going into halftime tied up 17 all
Right.
with UNC. I just wasn't. Um, so that's kind of my big takeaway. We didn't really roll anything out special today on offense. It seemed like we actually took a more conservative approach. We did mix in a few different personnel packages. You tried to get Lindsey involved, and forcibly so,
Right.
on some of these gadget type end around kind of quick screen, bubble screen things. But no, we didn't really unveil anything different. Didn't learn anything today, really to speak of, Mike.
It's probably a good thing, honestly. Super chat from Jeffrey. He says, "Happy holidays. Love the show. You guys are great. $20 from Mr. Kopski." I want to say that's
Thanks,
just
Jeff.
a beautiful Polish last name. Jeffrey, you'll have to correct me if I'm wrong. My family's Polish. So the SKI on the last name is a tell. So you'll have to let me know there, Jeff. We appreciate that. Few more small things before we get into comments from our blueandgold.com message board. We have our community there is asking questions for Mr. Goolsby as well. We'll get to the live chat questions, but a few more quick things. So Notre Dame was trailing 7-3, and this was into late in the second quarter. That Notre Dame was just looking very lethargic, and then you have that 28-yard rushing touchdown by Ian Book to go up 10-7. And then like 2 minutes later, you have the pass to McKinley. And then a minute later, another touchdown pass to McKinley. So Notre Dame's now going into halftime 24-7. In the drop of a hat, it goes from you're trailing 7-3 to going up into halftime 24-7. I guess that kind of speaks not
Mm-hmm.
only to Notre Dame having an explosive offense, but Syracuse having a pretty horrid defense. So when we look at, all right, Notre Dame struggled in the first quarter and mainly in the second quarter as well. What contributed to that, Mike? Was it just sleepwalking? Like I throw that term out, but what does that really mean?
We've discussed it on the show before. Sometimes that atmosphere in Notre Dame Stadium, it can be a little sleepy. So yeah, it's a little bit type of a little bit of a sleepwalkish kind of approach to things until you decide to wake up. But we had two big drops on that first drive alone, and it's inexcusable. I would love to see like a PFF type statistic, Mike, for total drops that Books had or had to overcome over the season. I mean, multiple drops a game. So it didn't have to be that bad had we scored on that first drive and not put a couple balls or dropped a couple balls. Um, I do think that sometimes, and I felt this when I was playing there, and it's not the case with this team to the degree that it was when I was there. So just to be clear, but yeah, sometimes Notre Dame, they play down to the level of competition and that they don't like dominate. Whereas and you even saw it coming out of halftime in the NBC broadcast. Uh, Coach Kelly's going, we got to dominate the third quarter, dominate the third quarter ad nauseum in his little pep talk leaving the locker room going out for the second half. And they did anything but dominate early in the third quarter.
Right.
So that's a leadership thing. I sometimes think uh, like game plan wise, it's just what do we do well? This is going to be kind of a sleepy, weird atmosphere. Senior day, we're playing a 1-7 football team, so maybe just schematically you go into that game like, listen, we're just going to run the ball, dudes. We may run the ball the first two possessions. We're just going to run the ball. We're going to get up by 10 maybe, and then we get into our game plan. We just need to get our bearings and kind of get oiled up. So when you have some of these drops early on in the offensive attack, it just kind of it just throws kind of a wrench in the plan, and you don't find your stride until much later in the game. So it's just something to consider. But at this point, with you're the number two team in the country, I don't blame Kelly per se for not being able to get the team up. I mean, you're big time football. There's a ton of NFL guys on that roster. If you can't get yourself up for a game, um, we got separate. That's a separate issue entirely.
For our YouTube audience, please continue to hit the thumbs up button if you haven't already. That goes a long way in helping our show if you're not able to drop us a super chat. All right, Mike, I wanted to touch on this briefly. Your senior day, you
Mm-hmm.
know, I hope you're not mad at me for bringing it up, but I feel like it's fitting, and we're trying to find some things to talk about after this game against Syracuse.
Sure.
What do you remember most about your senior day, Mike?
I can remember being emotional during the national anthem, like kind of frog in your throat type thing, and wanting to make plays. I ended up having an interception, but we lost. We lost to Boston College, and I've talked about Boston College enough in the last month or so. I'm good for a while, Mike. But yeah, we lost. Probably played a little bit uptight, like you saw, and we weren't as good of a team that year as this team is as they're constructed this year. So the talent wins out, the quarterback play wins out, and eventually kind of gets you over that sort of emotional hurdle. Um, but yeah, I don't have fond memories of it, Mike. I wish we would have come out there with a win, but um, it's just yeah. I do remember I do remember the weather being poor. It was drizzly. It was wet. It was slick out, and yeah, trying to get yourself almost out of your head, thinking about all your time there and all the work and all the blood, sweat, tears, broken bones that you'd had, and just to focus on playing football. And the team managed to do it today and get ahead and get a nice convincing win. And we couldn't pull that off when I was a senior. So again, thanks for bringing it up, buddy.
Now, your quarterback in that game was Brady Quinn. And
Yes.
I feel like it's a good time to now talk about Ian Book. He was 24 of 37, 37 passing attempts. That was a lot more than I was expecting. 285 yards, 3 touchdowns, and of course, he threw the interception into double coverage. It looked like he didn't see that safety over top, and he also ran 8 times for 53 yards and 2 touchdowns. So with the win, He's now won 30 games as Notre Dame's starting quarterback, and that passes Brady Quinn, your former teammate, Ron Paulus, who was standing on the sidelines, and the NBC broadcast crew was showing him a good bet, and Tom Clements. They all had 29. Man, I will save the question of how will we remember Ian Book 10, 15 years from now. I'll save that question for after he's played his last game in a Notre Dame uniform. So my question now is just how proud of you, or how proud are you of Ian Book for how he's performed this season? And I mean, the dude just carries the offense on his back, and the doubters of this guy have just completely been silenced.
Yeah, especially with go like I mentioned this earlier, Mike. Going back to the beginning of the season, as the season was maybe taking off, it was just so many unknowns. You didn't know who was going to catch the ball. You didn't know who was going to run the ball. Only thing we knew was that we had a strong offensive line, and we had a quarterback that had won a lot of games. Maybe hadn't done so in supreme fashion in terms of blowing up the stat sheet. So you look at how the season's evolved, and yeah, what's not to be proud of? You've got a 1,000-yard rusher in Kyron Williams who came out of freaking nowhere. And you've got Ian Book who is sort of being whispered about as a potential Heisman contender, and he did it with a bunch of unknowns. Did it with a Northwestern transfer, a true freshman tight end, and a fifth-year senior who's been on a shelf for 4 years.
Right.
So what's not to like? And he's been a tremendous, in this as a football alum, ex-captain, like he's been a tremendous ambassador of the program, just handles himself the right way. He's such an easy kid to root for. And we've watched him, Mike, we've watched him overcome his shortcomings.
Right.
Right. I mean, he hasn't grown. He's not 6'4", right? But he cured the happy feet a couple weeks ago. We've seen him. It just have that confidence that we were looking for so earlier on in the season. Yeah, it's been awesome to watch. And awesome's an overused word in today's culture, but it truly has been awesome to watch him develop, take the team on his back, just own the thing, and continue to reap the rewards. And he's not done yet.
Question here from Patrick Barnes, who also dropped us a $5 super chat, so we appreciate that as well. He says, thanks for all the post-game analysis all year. Will y'all be covering post-game for the ACC Championship? Patrick, you better believe it, man. We will be covering, we will have these post-game shows for the ACC Championship game, which we will get into in a little bit here, kind of discussing the scenarios for that. And, cross your fingers that Notre Dame makes the college football playoff. Of course, we will do post-game shows from that as well. All right, Mike, one more thing we definitely want to talk about is some offensive wrinkles. Saw the good old 23 personnel. No, I'm not talking about Kyron Williams' number. We're talking the 2 running back, 3 tight end set. And that means no receivers. You didn't have no Javon McKinley, no Ben Skoranek, no Avery Davis. No. You had Braden Lenzy, Chris Tyree, and then your 3 tight ends, I'm going to assume, is Tommy Tremble, Brock Wright, and Michael Mayer. So what'd you think about the game plan by Tommy Rees, some of these offensive wrinkles and formations?
Yeah, only a couple that we saw today. A little bit disappointing, too. I thought it was an opportunity for us to implement some new things against a lesser opponent. But we also have the luxury now, too, of having an extra week of practice. So I do anticipate you see more wrinkles going into that Clemson game. Really, the only 2 things, like you touched on, was the 23 personnel. Generically, you think you're going to run the ball out of that. But we actually threw the ball, leaked out both Tyree and Kyron. And then with Lenzy coming back into the fold, you did see them try and mix some things up. And I'm not a big fan of it. If Lenzy's going to be a receiver, let him be a receiver. You can't plug him in and force the ball to him on these end arounds and these little bubble screens. And that can throw off an offensive rhythm on any given drive as well, Mike. Maybe we see these, maybe we see like a fake bubble screen go ball. Who knows? Because up to this point, Mike, if Clemson's scouting us for our game a couple weeks from now, they know when number 0's in there, he's getting the ball. So we have to kind of build off of that. So we didn't see too much today. Um, we did see a wrinkle on defense where we went all out pressure, cover one, safety over the top, back leaked out for a nice gainer. I don't think I'd seen that uh, defensive scheme thus far. We screwed it up. The end needed to peel on that. Early in the game, there was a running back caught a long ball, kind of leaked out. It's fixable. So that was a little wrinkle that I'd seen. Just man up across the board, bring a ton of heat. But yeah, pretty vanilla game plan today, and probably keeping some things under wraps until we see Clemson next.
That's a good transition, Mike. Let's pull up the college football rankings. This is from this past, what was it, Tuesday night. So you have Alabama at the top spot. They play LSU at 8 p.m. We are, as we're recording this, at 6:43 p.m. Eastern time. So a little ways from that kickoff. Of course, Notre Dame number 2, and they knocked off Syracuse by 24 points. Clemson at number 3. They play Virginia Tech. Tonight, that kickoff at 7:30 Eastern, and then Ohio State had a easy win against Michigan State, 52-12. Texas A&M had an 11-point win over Auburn. I feel like Texas A&M's path to the college football playoff is not looking too good at this point. They lost to Alabama head-to-head, and they would need Alabama to trip up to get into the you know what, I think they would not even they probably can't even get that if Alabama loses. I believe they would hold the tiebreaker. So Texas A&M, a slim chance. And then you have the Florida Gators currently, as we're recording this live, 31-13 lead over Tennessee. So I guess we can give a shout out to Cincinnati at the number 7 spot. But I I'm not really expecting much from them. So here is, let's pull up now the potential opponents in the ACC Championship game. So if Clemson beats Virginia Tech, they're in. As simple as that. Then we'll have the rematch that we're expecting. If Miami, here's Miami's path. They would need Clemson to lose. The Tigers are 24-point favorite, so that's feel pretty good about Clemson's chances there. And then so they would need Clemson to lose, and then Miami beat out Duke and North Carolina. So like we still have our Blue and Gold Illustrated magazine, so it's kind of tough for us right now. This is a new thing we're having to do, is like, all right, we got to go to print to preview this next game, but we're not 100% sure who it is at this point. This is obviously Notre Dame's first championship game, so in the conference. So, but it does seem about 90% chance that Clemson would make it or so. So that's kind of the breakdown there, Mike. So let's just say the current rankings hold, and you have Alabama. Actually, okay. Look at the current rankings. You have Alabama 1, Notre Dame 2, Clemson 3, Ohio State 4. There's no way that I would assume that Notre Dame and Clemson would remain there. If Notre Dame beats Clemson, Clemson's out with 2 losses. If Clemson beats Notre Dame and it's not a blowout, you would assume Notre Dame still has a very good shot. So maybe Notre Dame sneaks in at number 4 and then has a, assuming Alabama would beat Florida. Sorry, guys, a lot of information thrown at you. Notre Dame, Alabama semis. How would you feel about that, Mike?
Say that one more time, Mike. My eyes were glazing over there. Say it one more time.
If Alabama, so yeah, we have a lot of information and stumbling at you. So let's say Notre Dame falls to Clemson in the ACC Championship game and gets in as the number 4 seed and faces Alabama in the first round of the college football playoff. How would you feel?
Bama's the only scary team to me in terms of Clemson. I don't think that the Clemson team this year is the Clemson teams that we become accustomed to seeing in terms of talent just across the board at every position. They're a fantastic team, but they're not as scary as they have been. Bama's a scary team, but they've got a they've got the quarterback again, not as multiple. He's more of a traditional quarterback this year, which is a little bit different than what we've seen in their very recent history. They've got the talent outside. That's the big that's where the pucker factor comes in for me, Mike. When I think about that matchup, is the matchups that they have and just the advantage that they have outside versus our secondary. That really scares me. Their running back isn't going to win a Heisman Trophy this year, like we've seen. They just had these stable of running backs again the recent past. So that's where you sort of focus on matchup wise is their talent outside versus our guys, and then so our front four. We're touch on those guys or discuss though our front four today, Mike. But our front four is going to have to balance that out and to give us a shot if we were to play in Alabama. They've got to be able to get to Mac Jones. But I think going back into this, so if we assume we're just in that scenario, you're going to assume a loss to Clemson. We drop down to number 4. We're getting into the playoff unless Clemson just beats the doors off of us in the second matchup here. But we'll see what happens with the second matchup in the championship game. It's boring to say take it 1 week at a time. But Ohio State also, Mike, to me, we talk about Alabama athletes. Ohio State has those athletes, and they have a mobile quarterback or a more mobile quarterback than Alabama does. So in a lot of ways, Mike, you could slice this multiple ways, but Clemson almost seems like the least scary potential opponent to me. And then you'd almost put Alabama's number 1 most scary. Ohio State's a close second. And then I'd put Clemson as a third.
What about Florida?
I'm sorry?
Florida?
What about them?
I don't think. Good.
Dude, look at these teams, though. We're looking at 4 teams, right? Bama, Notre Dame, Clemson, Ohio State. I don't think Florida. I love Coach Mullen. He's my ex-GA my freshman year when I was at Notre Dame. But I don't think Florida's like ready yet as a program, just in terms of championship medal, makeup, maturity. I don't think that they're there yet. So they've got athletes, no doubt. But in terms of that big game environment, having confidence in that kind of locker room, I don't get the sense, Mike, that Florida is what Ohio State is with Justin Fields or Alabama is, or where a Clemson would be with the Trevor Lawrence. I think that looking at those 4 teams, that looks very fitting to me, man.
Yeah. All right. Another super chat from Patrick Barnes, and we'll pull up his question as well. How will Notre Dame missing its center affect the Clemson game? So, of course, Jarrett Patterson is out for the year. Notre Dame just they're so deep in that second team. So you have Jarrett Patterson out, but then you have, I thought Gibbons did a nice job today. Lugg steps in. So I don't think, Jarrett Patterson being out is a huge detriment, against Clemson. Obviously you would rather have them, but I don't think that, from what we've seen these past 2 games against North Carolina and Syracuse, that, Notre Dame offensive line looks worse.
Yeah, I agree. It's a great scenario where he's had a couple games to get his feet more than wet. I mean, he's up to his knees at this point. And then the luxury that we have in Kyron's willingness and ability to make blitz pickups, because you're going to see everything in that Clemson game in terms of elaborate kind of blitz schemes, and they're going to test them. We do have a nice little safety net back there in Kyron, and he did a tremendous job in the first go around. So not a huge loss. He'll have another couple weeks to continue to prepare, and he's flanked by tremendous players. So not. It's not like you're losing Eichenberg. It would be a much bigger blow than losing Patterson up to this point.
Comment from Drew here in our YouTube live comments. He says Sean Crawford has as many senior day wins as Michigan has this year. I don't have any comments to add on that. I just wanted to pop that up. Just Interesting.
That's kind
So
of funny. It's
Sean
cute.
Crawford's
Yeah.
come out 3 times for senior day, right? Because this is his 6th year. So if
Could
I'm
make it 4. Could make it 4. Right.
7th year of
With
eligibility,
this COVID year. Yeah.
it potentially could have. All right, we're going to look. We're full on taking your questions time. So for our YouTube live audience and our blueandgold.com message board, this is your time. We'll take your questions. We'll go first to our blueandgold.com message board from Big Bex. He asks, "What is the message leaders need to deliver over the next 2 weeks?" So you have a bye week, then you again, we're assuming it's Clemson. So what's the message that these leaders need to deliver for the Notre Dame football team, and not only just the leaders, Mike, the coaching staff. What does that message need to be?
Prepare. Prepare. You're a professional the next 2 weeks. Study, so that you don't get nervous and you don't get uptight in that game because you know what the hell you're doing. And if you don't know how to prepare, get with somebody that does. That's the message. A lot of visualization over the next 2 weeks. Prepare, rest, get off your feet, hydrate, do all those things. But the main message is prepare so I know what the hell I'm doing when the ball gets rolled out for the second go around.
Another question here
100%.
from Irish Holland 3 on our blueandgold.com message board. He says, why did Kelly have the starters in on defense with 8 minutes to go, up 24 points? It looked like Dalen Hayes and Bo Bauer were possibly dinged up a little bit. Something interesting here to mention, Mike, is I feel like a lot of times Notre Dame fans are like, man, why doesn't Coach Kelly just step on these teams' throats? But then it's the starters are in too long, so I'm like, yeah, he can't win here. So yeah, I see the comment all the time on Twitter and our message board. It's like, all right, let's get the backup quarterback more reps. I don't think Brendan Clark was available for this game, but neither him or Drew Pine have had really any experience this year. So if God forbid if Ian Book were to go down, then it's a tough situation. So what do you think about all that, Mike?
Well, if you give, I mean, folks have got to get real. If you give your backup quarterback a quarter's worth of work, and then Ian Book goes down first series against Clemson, do you think we're going to be any better off if a kid had 2 quarters worth of football under his belt as a backup? It's like, so it's kind of negligible in terms of what kind of experience he's going to get. So I defer to Coach Kelly on that. People, like we said, we're the number 2 team in the country, Mike, and people are. I mean, you read comments and people are trying to like poke holes in this or poke holes in that. Just enjoy this, please. So I don't know why. I defer to Coach Kelly. Maybe Dalen Hayes as a senior, as a captain, was like, Coach, let me get one more series. And Coach trusts Dalen Hayes as his captain, who's played a lot of football. He's like, all right, you've earned it. Go get another series. Maybe wanted to get a sack. We don't know. But we were playing early. We were playing young kids very early into the game today. We talked about that texting during the game. Like number 56 is getting snaps at defensive tackle. He's not even up to the depth chart. So maybe we rolled in early, younger kids too early in this game as a counter argument. So I just defer to Coach Kelly. I'm sure somebody asked him during the press conference.
Yeah, good timing for this question by Ben Weiss. He says, "What do you think of Riley Mills?" That's somebody we were texting about, Mike, before we started recording. So the dude has stepped in. I don't think a ton of people are expecting him to, with Notre Dame's depth on the interior defensive line, to make it. I wouldn't say he's made some huge, Kyle Hamilton 2019 like impact on this defense. But I mean, look, Riley Mills is coming in and making plays.
Interesting guy because he's listed at, what was he, 259, like 6'5", 259.
Yep.
Looks to be substantially thicker than 250, 260 to me. At this point, he's not really like a point of attack guy. He's kind of a upfield rusher. So he's an interesting person to be able to maybe pull out like a Heinisch in a third and obvious situation and insert him into those types of obvious pass rush scenarios. But that's a football generic, just football. You need depth. You need depth at your defensive line. So when you do play those Bamas, you've got fresh bodies in there that can take that pounding and rotate guys in and out. So it's a nice thing to have. But the front fours played tremendous all year round. I thought they would played a little bit better today, but Syracuse had a nice little especially early in the game, getting the ball out of the quarterback's hands and playing with a little bit of tempo to sort of offset our pass rush. But yeah, good looking kid. Excited to watch him develop into the future.
Man, how good is the both sides of the line? The depth. These young guys step
Hmm.
in, Mike. I mean, 2019 season was Jacob Lacey on the defensive line, made an impact as a freshman. You have Riley Mills, that has looked good on the offensive line. Obviously, we don't have any freshmen, but when guys have gone down, the guys who've come in have stepped up. I mean, we talk about this, Mike. Notre Dame probably can't recruit all these studs, like just 5-star studs on the perimeter. It just I you can correct me if I'm wrong, Mike, but it just doesn't seem like Notre Dame's going to attract those kind of guys. Of course, I mean last year you had 5-star in the 2020 class. You had 5-star Jordan Johnson. In this class, they have multiple big time defensive back recruits in Ryan Barnes and Philip Riley, but it's not comparable to the amount of studs that Notre Dame's going to get on both sides of the line. So when we talk about what is Notre Dame's path to winning a national championship, it is smash mouth football. Like you've got it. You like when Notre Dame played Clemson in 2018 in the college football playoff, they couldn't run the ball. Like Notre Dame has to be more physical at the line of scrimmage to win. So just how impressed are you, Mike, with offensive and defensive line recruiting?
Yeah, they've super impressed with it. Um, it's between the tight end position, between our offensive line position. These 4 or 5 star kids really got to take a good long look at Notre Dame if they're a Notre Dame fit academically. Why wouldn't I go there? Because there's a what is it, a 50% chance? I mean, you end up being a starter on Notre Dame's offensive line, you're getting to the league, and you're starting to see that on the defensive side of the ball. So I think there's really a really unique culture. This was discussed during the broadcast today with Mike McGlinchey staying in touch with the kids that are playing now. But you're seeing a lot of that on the defensive side. Enough of these former Notre Dame defensive linemen are making names for themselves in the league, and we've got more kids on deck. So it's a part of that culture. It'll be interesting. I've always found it interesting, Mike, with the type of offensive linemen that we've had, the success that they've had in terms of their draft, um, where they go in the draft, being high draft picks. What is it going to take to get like that 5-star um, super stud running back that wants to carry the ball behind these guys? I'm not complaining about our running backs at all, but it just seems like there's a natural connection there between I'm going to go play behind one of the best offensive line units in and out, year in and year out, and there's got to be a freakazoid running back that's waiting in the wings at some point. We're
Sure.
going to land one of these guys,
I
Heisman
don't know if
Trophy
I'd
like.
I don't know if I'd call Chris Tyree a freakazoid, but man, yeah, that there's a
Oh
borderline
yeah,
five
like I
star
said, I'm
type
not
player.
complaining at all.
Right.
I'm not complaining at all.
Yeah.
But
Well, in
one of these Alabama type bell cow freaking 220-pound
sure.
first round draft pick Heisman Trophy winning running backs. There's going to be one soon.
Yeah.
Has to be.
Well, let's talk a little recruiting then. So in the 2019 class, you had Kyron Williams, who certainly is looking fantastic. 10 games this season, 1,000 yards rushing. So you can do the math there for what he's averaging. In that 2020 class, you had Chris Tyree. In this 2021 class, Notre Dame has Logan Diggs committed, a running back from Louisiana, who is actually in town this weekend, ironically enough. So we've talked about him in some podcasts, Mike. Not the fastest guy, but one of those who can make you miss in a phone booth, and it's got some good wiggle to him. And Notre Dame is also wanting a second running back in this class. And the two names to know really at this point, and make sure, actually Monday morning in my Gold Standard article, which is like all the recruiting scoop I've gathered from the past few days, we're really going to dive into running back recruiting. So Donovan Edwards is a top 100 national player from the Detroit area. Michigan is long been considered the favorite in that recruitment, but Notre Dame is looking to pull off the upset. And then you have Audric Estime, who is a Michigan State commit, who I want to say is listed. I don't have it in front of me right now. About 6'6", 6'1", like 215 pounds. Dude had a huge senior season in New Jersey. So if Notre Dame's either of those to pair with Logan Diggs, yeah, I think you would be pretty fired up about either of those guys, especially, man, if you get Donovan Edwards. But don't sleep on Audric for those who follow recruiting, because he is a big time player as well. We had a comment here from Sid Irish that I wanted to pull up. That I'm just it just does not make any sense to me. He says, watch Clemson tonight and ask yourself, can we hang with this team? Be honest. Hey, bud, Notre Dame beat Clemson. So what are you talking about? I'm not saying that, Clemson, Notre Dame's going to beat Clemson, but I don't understand how you can, maybe there's some more context here that's going on in the YouTube comment section that I'm missing here, but how could you even say, can we hang with Clemson when they beat Clemson this year?
Well, I'm reading these comments, and it's disappointing. It's this is we're the number 2 team in the country. We're undefeated, and people again they're trying to punch holes in the team, and I just don't understand the point. Why watch? Why get emotionally involved if you're just continue to expect a letdown? It doesn't make sense to me. And like somebody made a comment earlier, like you have to look the part. Well, we won't look the part. It's been discussed ad nauseum. We will not have a Julio Jones, a DeAndre Hopkins out wide. We won't. So if that's what they're considering as looking the part, stop watching, because it's not. We're not going to be able to sign those kids. We've talked about this a lot, Mike. Find a different team to root for, because we have different academic standards. You won't get those kids into the program. You just won't. So, but Notre Dame, the beauty of football is that the team game, and this team this season embodies that team, that whole team approach. I'm waiting for our special teams to do something. I did want to talk about that today. I mean, but yeah, you've got a tremendous football team. You may not have tremendous talent at these obvious positions, these wideout positions, but that's why you root for a Notre Dame type program. Enjoy it.
Well, Mike,
it's been a rough year, guys. It's been a rough year for everybody. Like, who would have thought that in August or September we'd be watching the number 2 team in the country go bang heads for a second time against the Clemson and not be optimistic? It's wild to me, man.
But
it's disappointing.
Notre Dame hasn't won the big one, Mike. Oh, they did. They beat Clemson, the number 1 team in the country. So, yeah, that's
So yeah, Notre Dame. So okay, so fine. So even if you want to talk about the first go around with Clemson not being the big one because they didn't have Trevor Lawrence, I'll grant you that. But look at the construct of our team. You've got a super strong defense. You've got a 1,000-yard rusher. You've got a quarterback that's won 30 games. In the history of Notre Dame football, 4 dudes have done it. There's a lot more. There's a lot of elements to our team that would make you feel comfortable advocating that they're going to win the second go around with Clemson. It's just it's glass half. And by nature, Mike, I mean, my friends could tell you, like, I'm a glass half empty. Hell, you're getting to know me. I'm more of a pessimist than I am an optimist. And I've seen enough Notre Dame football this year that I've become an optimist as it pertains to ND football 2020.
Sid Irish says, after we just railed on him, he says, I'll die with the Irish, but I'm trained by 25 years of letdown. So, yeah, I understand.
It's totally understandable. But what I'm asking you is, and we talked about this at the wrap up of our show last week, Mike, is to check your attitude. Like, check your attitude. I get it. That's understandable that you've been beaten up by 25 years of disappointments, but check your attitude. It's just make that mental shift in terms of how you view the program this season.
Another reminder, folks, please hit the like button. We're at 79 right now. There's no reason we shouldn't. By the time that, maybe 3 days from now, there's no reason we shouldn't get up to 400. So 79 as we're recording this live. But if you're watching us back, if you're watching us live, go ahead and hit that thumbs up button. That helps out our channel. We'll take one more question from our bluemoongold.com message board, and we'll see if anything pops up here in YouTube before we sign off. Irish Holland 3 says the offense has been great all year long. I don't look too great in the beginning of the season, but it's certainly come along. He says, with a bye week before the ACC title game, what wrinkles do you see being implemented? Interesting question, because I remember last week, Mike, you thought that, hey, Notre Dame might use, like, Notre Dame might look a little sluggish against Syracuse because they might try some new things to get ready for the college football playoff. Well, the game next Saturday against Wake Forest was canceled. ACC basically said this game doesn't need to happen, so let's cancel it. So now, do you see anything being implemented? Anything new in the offense? And if so, Mike, I mean, obviously this is just speculation. This is for fun.
Total crystal ball here, Mike. But we've got a new center, new-ish center in your interior line. We know how Coach Venables at Clemson's defensive coordinator, we know how much he loves to bring these exotic blitz and stunt packages. So, dude, I think that they're going to hammer us with that. So maybe we implement different elements to the screen game, maybe tight end screens, something like that. Maybe that's a tight end screen. That's what maybe on my crystal ball kind of wish list, because that would make sense as they vacate the middle of their defense, rushing up the middle where we could leak a tight end, shovel pass type screen plays for the tight end. But you're going to have to see more of the screen game to offset or slow down that pass rush, those blitz packages that you're going to see from Clemson. So I'd imagine that we'll see some work on that in the bye weeks. So excited to see what they roll out the second go around here.
Mr. Goolsby, any closing thoughts before we sign off, man? Anything that we didn't touch on that you want to hit on?
No, I just like I said, I'll say the same thing we said getting off the air last time, Mike, is enjoy it, enjoy the ride, and it's okay for people to admit that they're wrong. You know, you and I get called out when we say things that ended up being not true or just silly, whatever it is. And people were wrong about Ian Book, and it's okay to admit that. And it's okay, I guess, in the same breath, Mike, it's okay to be optimistic about the second go around with Clemson. And then, so what happens if you beat Clemson? And then now we're a 2 seed going into the playoff.
Maybe
and then
even one. Who? Probably not. Probably
what?
not a one.
Yeah, exactly.
But
So we're a 2 seed going into the playoff, and then they're saying, well, it doesn't matter. We're going to get our breaks beat off by Ohio State. It's like, dude, football should be an escape for a lot of people, especially as watching at home. It should be an escape. And 2020 has been a hell of a year. Notre Dame football, Ian Book, Kyron Williams, man, they've given us a lot to look forward to this year. And I think that we should be grateful to be in the position we're at. I think that's a great way to lead your life, from a place of gratitude. And I just wish our fans were a little bit more grateful and less pessimistic. It's sad, dude. It's disappointing, especially had I known.
Group. I feel like most of the fans are pretty happy.
The country we live in now, Mike, there's a lot of small groups that make a lot of noise, and it gets a lot of attention, and that's what we're seeing now. So it's be optimistic and enjoy it, and be grateful for what we've got to experience thus far. It's been a tremendous year, really has.
We do have one more question I think is really good to address. Does
Sure.
Clark Lee leave after this year? Of course, the Vanderbilt job opened up with Derek Mason getting canned, and Clark Lee is a Vandy alum. Clark Lee is a very, I don't want to butcher this word, but I love using this word. This is the best word to describe Clark Lee: professorial. He's just a very, very smart dude.
Super impressive, yeah.
Yeah, different temperament than, he's the opposite of a rah-rah guy, but players love him. So I'm not going to ask you to predict what Clark Lee would do, but let's just say it. You could take this however you want, Mike. Just your thoughts on Clark Lee potentially to Vanderbilt, but would you take it? If you were him, that's a tough question to ask. But on one hand, it's an SEC job, but
I would not take the Vanderbilt job. I watched a little bit of that game because they had the female kicker. I was like, I'll tune in. They're bad. Vanderbilt's bad. It would look like their defense looked like they were filming like Friday Night Lights, like they were pretend tackling, almost like they were like extras in a movie. That's how bad it is. it's interesting how Notre Dame coaches are compensated, or who basically cuts their check. Uh, and it's also interesting to contrast like Vanderbilt, the idea of Clark Lee leaving, and then how much longer is Brian Kelly going to stick around? It's also interesting how much money can Clark Lee ask for to stay at Notre Dame, but contrast that with how this season ends up, right? So I think we still have to finish out the season and see how strong we play. And if we win a national championship, if we show out against Alabama and lose in a tight game, or lose to an Ohio State in the Clark, open up the coffers, pay the man to stay. With Clark Lee, the few times that I've listened to him on podcasts and various interviews, one of the most impressive guys, certainly the most impressive football coach that I've ever listened to speak. And a guy like that might not chase money. I think
Sure.
he understands football, and developing young kids is about more than a paycheck. So for him to be lured away by dollar signs, with him in particular, doesn't really concern me.
Sure.
Um, so we'll have to wait and see how the season finishes up. But I don't see him going anywhere.
Hmm.
But I think you do pay him more to stay, and I do think you sort of dangle that carrot in terms of maybe replacing Brian Kelly one day, because with his background and with his approach to the game and with his approach to developing kids, he's a freaking perfect fit for a school like Notre Dame. Perfect.
Yeah.
So, uh, not a huge concern of mine.
I guess we'll have to see after the season. All right, that's gonna do it for our live show here. Again, if you're watching on live on YouTube, back on YouTube, we appreciate you so much. Continue to watch our YouTube content here, as well as go to blueandgold.com for coverage from myself on the recruiting beat, and then Patrick Angle and Lou Samoji. Yes, the great Lou Samoji. All
Big
the
Lou.
articles that those guys are writing up blueandgold.com. We will catch you December 19th, ACC Championship Game, likely against Clemson. That will be the next time Mr. Goolsby and I will be going live. But before that, the week of that game is National Signing Day. Yes, early National Signing Day. So Notre Dame's taking a big class. So make sure to lock into blueandgold.com for all of your coverage of Notre Dame football and recruiting.